Welcome everyone to the debate. I'm Professor Becky Francis, Director of the UCL Institute of Education, and we've got an exciting debate in front of us. Our debate's title is, "This House Believes That I Can Just Google It is Making Us Stupider." Now, I don't think that the title has any sort of complicated inference about American influence or anything in the language. We don't need to notice that spelling of stupider. Instead, we're asked to focus on the reliance on search engines rather than memory and knowledge. And we've got a wonderful collection of speakers in front of us today. We're going to start, though, by welcoming and starting with the vote. So, thinking about this vote, does I Can Just Google It make us stupider? If you agree with that, you've got your clickers in front of you, and you vote A, to support the motion, B, to disagree with the motion, and if you're undecided, press C. So we'll start that now. Okay, so we have a clear, a clear vote against there. So our proponents are going to have a hard job on their hands to convince us. Over to the proponents. We're very lucky to have Daisy Christodoulou, Director of Education for No More Marking, and Sam Freedman, Executive Director of Teach First, to speak to the motion. And speaking against the motion will be Koen Timmers, of the Varkey Teacher Ambassador from Belgium, and Andrew Smith-Lewis, co-founder and CEO of Sergio. So, without further ado, we will be hearing from our speakers. And first of all, I would like to invite Daisy to come and speak to the motion.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. In a letter to a friend, the ancient philosopher Seneca recounted the story of a rich Roman merchant who wanted to appear as though he was a very well-read man. And so this merchant decided that instead of actually reading books himself, he would instead hire a team of slaves to do the reading for him. He spent an enormous amount of money on slaves, one of them to know Homer by heart, another to know Hesiod, while he assigned one apiece to each of the 9 lyric poets. Then he used these slaves to give his dinner guests nightmares. He would have these fellows at his elbow so that he could continually be turning to them for quotations from these poets, which he might repeat to the company. Now, of course, no one nowadays has slaves to remember things for them, but we do all feel very comfortable with the idea that we can outsource our memories to Google. And in my book, 7 Myths About Education, I devoted a chapter to collecting examples of technologists and educationalists telling us that remembering things is no longer necessary in a world with ubiquitous smartphones. But these people are wrong, and they're dangerously wrong. And it isn't just ancient writers like Seneca who tell us they're wrong. There is a whole body of modern scientific literature which makes the same point. And somewhat ironically, a great deal of this research derives from the work of Herbert Simon, who was one of the pioneers of artificial intelligence and modern computing. And what we know from all of this research about how the brain works is that memory and attention are 2 vital parts of our intellectual equipment. We also know that memory and attention are under siege from modern technology like never before. So let's consider these 2 vital components in turn. Why do memory and attention matter, and why are they under threat from technology? So first of all, memory. And our memories really matter because we need facts stored in long-term memory in order to be able to think. And that's because our working memory, what you might think of as consciousness, is extremely limited. It can handle only about 4 to 7 new items of information at any one time. And that's not nearly enough to do anything complex like driving, like reading a book, So how do we cope? How do we manage those activities? Well, the answer is that you can cheat the limitations of working memory, not by using Google or hiring a bunch of slaves, but you can cheat the limitations of working memory by storing facts in long-term memory. And that's one of the reasons why memorizing times tables matters. Because when you are solving real-world complex maths problems like the ones you might encounter in everyday life, those problems take a lot of working memory space up. You have to process a lot of information there. If you also have to stop every second to be typing times tables calculations into your smartphone, that's a problem. Your working memory will quickly be overwhelmed and you won't be able to solve the problem. You'll be in the situation that many children get in, which is that you will forget the beginning of the problem by the time you get to the end of the problem. And it's by storing facts in long-term memory we get around that issue. And as one group of researchers have said, long-term memory is the seat of human intellectual skill. What we know influences how we see the world, how we think, how we reason, and even things like intuition and creativity, to a large extent, are the function of large and well-memorized bodies of knowledge which are clashing against each other. So this is not the kind of thing you can outsource. And if memory is so important, it's also important for us to think about, therefore, how we make memories, which brings me to the second point I want to talk about, attention. Because the simplest way of thinking about how we create memories is that if we pay attention to something, if we think about it, we're more likely to remember it. And nearly all of the major technology companies make their money by harvesting our attention and selling it to advertisers. And as I think we're all aware of now, these companies have invented ever more sophisticated methods of doing so, of grabbing our attention, even if those methods involve distorting the truth, manufacturing outrage, exploiting loneliness, and Sam is going to discuss some more of that in his speech. And in the process of doing so, these companies are not just distracting our attention, they are degrading the quality of our attention. Think how hard it is to concentrate on reading a book after you've spent some time on social media. And recent research shows that even the sight of a mobile phone it makes it harder for us to focus. So, given the vital importance of attention for forming memories, a system that's built on stealing and degrading our attention, that can't be making us smarter. And at this point, people might typically say, well, okay, fair enough so far, but what about the good uses of technology? What about things like Khan Academy or Duolingo or Coursera? Or what about Andrew's platform, Serego, which uses the science of learning to design educational content that really will stick in students' minds? And I agree that these websites are absolutely fantastic. I want to make that clear. These kind of websites give billions of people access to high-quality educational content at low or even no cost. That is fantastic. And we on this side of the house are absolutely not opposed to educational technology. I really want to make that clear. I work for an edtech company. When I was an English teacher, I was constantly experimenting with new methods of digital learning. But what we on this side of the house are opposed to are misconceptions like the one in the title of this debate, that you can just Google it. Or, as one Google executive said recently, I don't know why children are learning the quadratic equation. I don't know why they can't just ask Google for the answer. And in fact, the reason why we are so opposed to misconceptions like this is precisely because we're such big fans of EdTech. We want EdTech to work. And when you have misconceptions like the one in the title of this debate, these misconceptions make it harder for the really powerful and effective methods of EdTech to fulfill their potential, because the really powerful and effective methods are not about outsourcing memory. They are about making the process of memorization as effective, as efficient, and as fun as possible. And not only that, but these powerful forms of educational technology, I think they are also being damaged by the technology companies' insatiable appetite for our attention. So just let me give an example of this. Online education courses have a phenomenally high dropout rate. One study from 2014 showed that just 13% of people who enroll in an online course complete it. Why is this? Now, there's been a number of reasons put forward for it, but I'd like to suggest that one important reason is that because these courses are delivered online, they're therefore competing with everything else that online has to offer. They're competing with the instant social updates, the flash shopping discounts, the cat videos, Donald Trump's Twitter feed. So it isn't enough to create fantastic educational content for free. In order for it to make people smarter, people have got to pay attention to it. And at the moment, large numbers of them aren't. So, of course, one could imagine a world in which technology was used to make us smarter. I sincerely hope we will get to that world, and I'd happily sketch the outlines of that world for you. But the point is, I think, sadly, that's not the world we currently live in, because the technology we use at the moment prioritises entertainment, outrage, distraction, and convenience ahead of learning. And by and large, the big money in technology is not going towards helping children to learn their times tables in the most efficient and fun way. It is going towards encouraging children to take another selfie and don't worry about the times tables because there's a robot who'll solve that for you. I began with a story from Seneca. I'll finish there too. Seneca concluded his story of the Roman merchant with the following moral. A sound mind can neither be bought nor borrowed. I would add the following modern updating. A sound mind can neither be bought nor borrowed nor outsourced to the cloud. And until we recognise that truth, I think that Google will continue to make us stupider. Thank you.
Thank you, Daisy. Koen, could I ask you to speak against the motion?
Right. So, did Gutenberg make us stupid? 2,500 years ago, Socrates worried that the written word would have a negative effect on the students' memories. And in 1950, American teachers were afraid of the ballpoint pen, that it would be the ruin of education. There's always been a resistance to technological innovation, and time after time it's been proven wrong. And here yet we stand again, having a debate whether innovation is making us more stupid. Just Google it. Well, it's just a tool. It's neutral. It's like a calculator. You can use it in a good way, you can use it in a bad way. Forrest Gump once said, "Tools can't make you stupid. Stupid is as stupid does." It's my favorite reference, okay? People have been afraid of internet banking in the beginning as well. Anybody in this room who lost money because of hackers? Nobody? You? Well, you still made it to Dubai, right? Okay? No, it's just, well, today I come to speak to you as a teacher. Any teachers in this room? Welcome. And from my experience, we sometimes have to shift from instruction to other approaches. And I stress sometimes, okay? Sometimes we have to shift to collaborative learning, learning by doing. And I launched some global education projects during the last years. And the last one, the Climate Action Project, involved 250 schools across 69 different countries. And I noticed that the students, they were more engaged, became more creative, they increased their social skills, and they built their own knowledge, which is confirmed by research. And during the project, I asked the students, they had to do the working. They had to explore, brainstorm, reflect, offer feedback. They had to present their findings, which I published on the website, and what was essential during this process was using Google. The students, they had information, they had immediate access to information. They felt empowered, and sure, they stumbled upon wrong information during this process, but it was the teacher's duty to point them in the right direction. The teachers, they became facilitators, mentors, help desks. They helped the students to understand and interpret the information they were accessing. And having that huge amount of information at their fingertips, the students had energy, more energy, to shift to something else. They were able to build prototypes, offer feedback to each other, connect to the world. So, what do we want? Students memorizing facts about the Falcon Heavy, or students knowing how to solve problems, how to find and select the right information, and potentially creating the next generation of rockets. And if you don't know that the Falcon Heavy was the largest rocket launched into space by Elon Musk, maybe you should Google it, right? 65% of today's students will be employed in jobs which don't yet exist. How can we teach them facts if we don't know yet what they are going to be doing? It's just a shift of mind, right? Okay? And we need to offer our students the 4 C's: creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, and communication. Those skills are key in the fourth industrial revolution, we wrote a book about it. Hey, 2030, okay? And, well, we need basically to connect our students to the world, to allow them to bring the world into their classroom. A world in which 25 different countries, ladies and gentlemen, 25 countries are blocking Google. 25. And I don't think that they are blocking or banning Google because it makes the people stupid. Thank you.
Thank you, Koen. Sam, could you speak for the motion, please?
Good afternoon, everybody. So if Koen had Googled how the British Parliament works, this room is based on the British Parliament, he'd know you're not allowed to cross the red lines. That actually means that everything he said would be invalidated. So just to be clear. So some of you may have spotted I'm actually a late replacement in this debate for Arnie Duncan. For those of you who don't know Arnie Duncan, he's the former US Secretary of State. He's also a 6'4" ex-basketball player. So you'll understand when I say that I am going to struggle to step into his shoes, both literally and metaphorically. But anyway, as I kind of suspected, our opponents have interpreted this motion to be, is technology a good thing or not? And if that was the motion, we'd be sitting on that side of the house, both of us. Daisy, as you said, she works for an ed tech company. Me, when I should be working, I'm on Twitter. So we are big supporters of educational technology. We see the value that technology can have in every aspect of modern life, including education. It's not going to solve all our problems. It's not a magic silver bullet, but we can see the benefits of approaches like the one Andrew takes. But that's not what this motion is. This motion is I can just Google it is making us stupider. And that just is the key word. I can just Google it. And our contention is that educationalists across the world have taken the existence of platforms like Google and believe that because of they exist, we can outsource our memory, as Daisy put it. And that means in education systems now around the world, knowledge accumulation, the basic building blocks of learning, are being neglected in favor of fads and gimmicks. And we have seen, you only need to go into a couple of events at this conference to know how pervasive that now is. How many times have we heard the phrase 21st century skills? How many times have we seen education systems that are moving away from those building blocks of knowledge towards vague and abstract ideas, resilience, creativity, that cannot be the basis of the kind of education systems that we need? How many times have we heard that we need to be focusing on discovery learning, letting kids learn through play, rather than the traditional mechanisms of content transfer that have been the basis of education systems in the past? But we know this isn't true. We know every bit of evidence that we have tells us that direct instruction is more effective than discovery learning, that focus on a proper curriculum made up of proper knowledge content is more effective than vague and abstract 21st century skills. We have evidence from PISA, from the OECD. There's a recent McKinsey report I would suggest you look at that looked at the PISA data from the OECD and showed absolutely clear, I'd ignore the writing, which is waffle, just look at the tables, which is really clear, that direct instruction, every country that uses direct instruction more than discovery learning, it does extremely well in the PISA tests. We have the same thing from the Hattie meta-analyses of learning. Again, direct instruction has some of the biggest impact of anything that you can do. Every study we have, every RCT points to this. But why is it ignored? Why do we not take this evidence into account when we build our education systems? Because we think we can just Google it. Because this lure of technology to think that it doesn't matter anymore what we know inside our heads is leading us to be stupider. And why does it matter that it's in our heads? Well, Daisy's explained it. Because long-term memory is the basis of learning. Because if it's not in our heads, if it's not there, we can't use it to sequence ever more complex knowledge and ever more complex ideas. Real creativity doesn't come from the kind of 21st century skills model. It comes from deep, deep understanding of your subject. You could ask me to write an essay on quantum mechanics. You could give me a month to do it. Give me access to all the knowledge on Google and all the knowledge on the internet, and I would produce a load of rubbish because I don't have the underlying scientific concepts in my head that would allow me to understand what I was reading and what I was accessing on those websites. And that is the problem. So I think it's pretty clear, if you look at the evidence, that knowledge accumulation is as important as it ever was, and this idea that we can now downplay it is incredibly destructive and is making us stupider. Arguably, it's more important than it ever has been before, precisely because there is so much information out there that can now lead us astray. I hesitate to use the phrase fake news, because the horrendous giant orange baby in the White House has sort of tarnished that phrase somewhat. But fake news is real. It is pervasive in our society. There was a study out last week showing that incorrect news stories travel 6 times faster on Twitter than true ones. Lies travel much faster than the truth these days. Indeed, we had one in Koen's speech. We had the old canard that 65% of jobs that our children will be doing don't exist yet. I have desperately tried to find the origin for this fact. I found it. I've gone all the way back to a World Economic Forum article where I first found that fact. It's based on nothing. There is no source for that. It is just plucked out of the air by a researcher, and it is repeated at every education conference around the world. Classic piece of fake news. But perhaps a more destructive example that I thought was relevant, because we saw those students from Florida yesterday opening this conference in the guns debate in America. If you look at the debate and how it's happening in America, one of the common themes on the right, on the sort of pro-gun side, is this view that if the Jews had had guns, then the Holocaust would never have happened. They'd have been able to hold off the Germans. If they'd been able to defend themselves, they'd be able to have avoided the Holocaust. Now, if you don't know anything, that sounds plausible. If you read it in a sort of an article by someone who's calling themselves a professor, they use some fancy references, you could believe that. That sounds plausible, that people didn't defend themselves. Of course, if you actually know anything, if you've got any knowledge about the Holocaust pre-existing in your brain, you'll know that it's nonsense, that the Warsaw Uprising, Jews indeed tried to rebel against the Nazis and were brutally oppressed for doing so. But you wouldn't know that if you didn't have any knowledge. And I am terrified that we are degrading children's ability and young people's ability and adults' ability to read critically, because we think knowledge is all out there and we can outsource it. And yet, if there's nothing in your head to start with, there is no way you can read critically and analyze arguments. I would argue very strongly that there is no generic rubric that you can come up with for reading the internet critically. You have to have a starting basis of knowledge to be able to do that. Again, going back to me trying to do quantum mechanics. If I read the Wikipedia entry on quantum mechanics, it's Wikipedia, I kind of trust that. I have no way of knowing if the information there is correct, because I haven't got any information stored in my long-term memory about it. So just to conclude, if we want our young people to be successful, if we want to build education systems that really help us in the future, that help us to think critically, that help us to be creative, we have to go back to a focus on knowledge accumulation, true deep learning, and move away from this idea that I can just Google it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sam. Andrew, to speak against the motion.
Hi. I'm actually super nervous about doing this because I've never been in a debate, a formal debate. And so, of course, I did what we would all do, right? I Googled how to win a debate. Top 3 pieces of advice. 1, think as if you were a judge, not yourself. Always think comparatively. Always act like you're winning, even if you're not. Kind of fake it till you make it, which is good advice, and that's what I'm going to do. You know, is Google making us super geniuses? Are we all smarter because of Google? I don't really know. But the good thing is, I don't have to make that argument to win this debate. We just have to focus on what this debate is about, and is Google making us stupider? In my preparation for the debate, I tried to imagine what the other side would come up with, and I thought that it's a difficult argument to make that Google is making us stupider. And I thought the nuclear option would be to bring up Trump, right? I thought the absolutely insane argument would be to bring up fake news, gun control. But I never imagined that my opponents would bring up the Holocaust in arguing about whether Google makes us stupid. I don't even know how to respond to that. It's beyond me. Look, how many of you are guilty? How many of you have just Googled something? All right. How many of you have done this in the last 24 hours? Do you feel your cognitive capabilities slipping away? Do you feel dumber from having Googled something? Now, sometimes we just need to know stuff, right? So you might Google for transactional information, a sports score, a good restaurant in Dubai, something trivial. But how many of you have had that just Google moment where you're in a conversation and you look something up because it's the missing piece, it's the component you need to understand what's being discussed and move forward, right? That, to me, is a great Google moment, and I think we need more of those Google moments, right? Does that diminish our intelligence? I don't really think so. So let's talk about proof. There were debates about evidence. We talked about research. Let's talk about some research. Where's the proof that Google is making us stupider, right? Given the prevalence of Google, you'd think like the IQ of the planet was like slipping away, and we're not going back to America, and we're not talking about that thing anymore, okay? But so here's the deal. I think the evidence is quite to the contrary. In fact, a recent analysis published in the Journal of Psychological Science included more than 4 million people in 31 countries found that the average gain of intelligence is 3 points per decade, or roughly 10 points per generation. So the trend line is that we're all getting smarter, which I think is a good thing. What about our young kids, right? Does giving equal access to a kid in Kenya and a kid in Kansas make them stupid? Given the multitude of issues that we're facing today, do you think that basically it's a good idea to take away their ability to get access to the world's greatest source of knowledge? Is that making people stupid? I don't really think so. In fact, there's a lot of research that shows that Google might be doing good things for us. How many of you are worried about cognitive decline as you get older and more silver? Anyone? A couple of us, right? Well, we all know that things like playing Sudoku or crossword puzzles, there's some good research that shows that that actually benefits us. And what was interesting is there's a study in UCLA by a researcher named Small in 2008 that found that Google actually has a really beneficial effect. Striking finding was the internet searching appears to engage a greater extent of the neural circuitry that is not activated during reading, right? Google gives us information, it helps us make connections, it encourages plasticity, and that's the brain's remarkable ability to change throughout life. This is not a bad thing. Another one, the Pew Internet and American Life Project, published a few days ago, 895 experts, 76% agreed with the statement that by 2020, people's use of the internet has enhanced human intelligence as people are allowed unprecedented access to more information, they become smarter and make better choices. Lastly, Paul Jones, clinical professor of the School of Information and Library Science at the University of North Carolina. Google allows us to be more creative in approaching problems, more integrative in our thinking. We spend less time trying to recall and more time generating solutions. So why are we having this debate? Well, I Googled around my esteemed colleagues here, and you should Google for Daisy, because Daisy has some remarkable content on the internet, not just the books she read, but some amazing videos. And I watched a video, a lecture that she gave in 2016 on 21st century skills, where she makes a very passionate argument about technology and education. And one of her conclusions in that presentation is, quote, "As ever with technology, it isn't that it is innately good or bad, it's what's happening with it." And I think that gets to the crux of the matter, right? So it's not about the information, it's what you do with the information, and that's what's really important. This debate shouldn't confound that, right? It's not the act of searching that is the negative side, right? Facts on their own aren't knowledge. What makes us stupid is failing to really realize that in part, right? The issue lies with the guidance that we give students about how to use these profound tools, especially with younger learners. The issue we face with technology is that we have this cutting edge technology, but the practice of teaching has been left in the past, and I think that needs to change, right? As all of this what and where that is introduced on the internet brings us to online classes and all sorts of wonderful things, how information is used is what really matters, and this is what we need to teach people. The emphasis should be on synthesizing, connecting, and creating, not just memorizing facts, right? And if your kid goes to a school where they can just Google it and get away with it, then you should switch schools. You're probably in the wrong place. Last night, I had a chance to talk to some very special high school kids from Florida, and I asked them, does just Googling it make you stupid? And they looked at me as if I was stupid for asking such a stupid question. And I said, no, I'm in this debate, and that's the subject of the debate. I want to tap into your wisdom, help me out. So Susanna said something really interesting. She mentioned affordability. She said, if you can't pay for an overpriced textbook, you can find that knowledge on Google, and you can access it for free. That was kind of cool. And then Kevin mentioned the concept of creating a broader base of knowledge that you get from accessing multiple sources rather than just one source, right? And they all agree that just Googling it fosters a sense of curiosity and wonder. This is some really smart kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, those were some spirited inputs. You've been deploying all the powers of rhetoric, so I'll be interested to see whether you're convinced one way or another. This is now your opportunity to put your questions to our experts. Got one here. Sorry, is there a mic? Maybe you can shout out. It's coming. The lady behind first. So, the lady first. Yeah. Please.
Okay. So, my name is Miriam Ismail, and I just wanted to ask a question about Google and trust. I felt like now that you have Google, people don't trust their own mentality. Like, I was in the mall with someone and they Googled where the movie theater was. I'm like, just read the signs. So that's what I was thinking, like, does Google and YouTube and things like this, do they take away your ability to trust your own knowledge that you have instead of just thinking about it and looking for the answer, you Google it?
Thank you very much. And so this is to our opponents, correct? Would one like to answer?
Yeah.
Koen?
Is it to us?
Yes. Okay. I think it was to the opponents. Am I correct?
Whoever has the best answer.
Oh, in that case, we'll have one each. Okay. So Andrew, did you want to start? And then we'll have a response from Daisy.
I mean, I think you don't check your wisdom and your common sense at the door, right? I think that there's a requirement to stay fairly human in the conversation, and that there's a balance, right? And if Google actually makes you think about things in a slightly different way and question certain things, maybe that's not a bad thing. Being in a mall and Googling for the theater, I think your friend might need a little bit of assistance. But I think that for the rest, people out there who are using Google as a way of questioning their ideas, that's what education should be about to a certain extent. And so I think, again, it comes back to the teachers to foster that sense of curiosity. The other side of faith is doubt, and you can't have one without the other. And maybe that tool fosters that.
Just to make
Thank
a
you,
comment,
Andre.
I think really we are the pre-Google generation. So we already have brains, you know what I'm saying? The people that are post-Google, they don't have that kind of wealth of knowledge already in their brains.
Thanks. A quick response from this side.
Yeah, I think you've picked up on exactly the key point in this debate, which is that Google's fine. I use Google all the time. We all do. I thought Andrew gave a great defense of Google. But that's not what this debate's about. It's about just Google it, and it's about whether outsourcing our memories to the cloud, to the internet, is dangerous. And that's what we're arguing, and I think you're absolutely right to focus on it.
Thank you. We had a question in front here, this gentleman in the T-shirt. Can you make clear who you're targeting the question at, please? And also, can you keep it to a clear question?
Sure. So this question is to the proposition. I don't know if that's what you call it. or rather, I suppose I should direct this through the chair. The proposition has quite clearly emphasized what the point of this debate is in their opinion, that it's focused around the word just. But I think that they are then over-interpreting it as a focus on outsourcing our memories to the cloud. We could give some kind of stat around the amount of data that's being created on a daily basis. It's probably going to be made up, and I think it's Sam, and he's probably going to Google the source of the data and not find the source. But the truth of the matter is that there's more information being created every single day, and there's far too much for any single human being to contain all of that data. So I think it's impossible for us to try and memorize everything. I think it is key that, well, I think what the opposition is trying to say is that we're not trying to outsource our entire memory, but it's what tools other than Google do we use? Excuse me. Other than Google do we use if we need to access the vast amounts of information out there that our brains can't contain?
Thank you. Daisy?
Yeah, I can say that. What tools do we use to be able to access Google? We use long-term memory. That's exactly what Sam and I have been arguing, that in order to make a Google search, in order to be able to make sense, you're absolutely right about the vast quantities of information out there. And as Sam said, that's an argument for saying long-term memory is even more important. What you need in long-term memory are those frameworks, are those schemas of knowledge that allow you to make sense of what you're seeing, that allow you to see, is this an internet hoax, is it something meaningful? And I think as the previous lady said, and as Sam was saying, actually when you've got all of that, you can use Google. But what the opposition have told us, they've told us that not just that you can use Google, they've told us that you can use Google to acquire those facts to begin with. As Koen said, the teacher doesn't intervene. The teacher just lets them learn in a discovery environment. That's what we're saying is the problem. You cannot learn everything you need to know through Google. Once you've got that fundamental schema and you've got that framework in long-term memory, then using Google is great. But I think what a lot of us people can fall into here is this, it's kind of an expertise blinding effect, that when you're very good at something and you can use Google effectively, you forget all of the long-term memory you need to make sense of it. You forget that your critical thinking skills, your ability to distinguish between truth and lies is dependent not on an abstract, generic toolkit, it's dependent on all those facts that are stored in long-term memory. And if you rely on Google to acquire those facts, we would just end up with children who are lost in a sea of misinformation.
Thank you, Daisy. Now, I can't see a thing because I've got the lights on me. So I'm going to have to rely on the person with the microphone to see if anyone's hand is up and direct to that person.
Just a quick question to you, Daisy. How do you define stupid and then stupider? Is it memory? Is it critical thinking? Is it all of these things together?
So, I mean, obviously that's the title we've been given. But I would say a lot of the things Sam was talking about, if you're looking at I would agree actually with a lot of the aims that the opposition said. I would agree with all those things about creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, problem solving. For me, being good at those things is what we should be aiming to achieve. I think they're incredibly important. My argument is not about those aims. My argument is about the methods with which we achieve those. And I don't think that relying on Google for education is going to achieve those aims.
Thank you. Other questions?
Sorry, I thought it was meant for me. Boaz Waruku is my name, from Kenya. At the undergraduate level, I had a good teacher, Professor Thorofondinyi. We kept on disturbing him and asking him, teacher, we call that in Kiswahili mwalimu, how come you can respond to almost everything, even without thinking much about it? He gave us one quick response. One, if I don't have it here, I know where I can get it. In other words, he could Google it, even at that level. Basically, I think the proponents of this debate are becoming mischievous, and I would like them to help us. I would like them to help us because, one, is it about Googling, or it is the material that is being Googled? They should clearly explain to us, because if you have garbage that you're trying to scavenge through, then that's terrible. But please explain to us, what exactly are you considering to be that stupid? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Sam?
I don't see mischievous as being an insult, so I don't see what the problem is. That's the point of debating, surely. Again, I just think it goes back to the same point that we keep making, that if you know if you have some idea of what you're looking for, then these great wells of knowledge that sit out on the internet are valuable. But if you don't, if you think you can just Google it, if you think you don't need to have that schema in place, you can't. So the garbage analogy is a good one. If you end up searching through garbage, you won't find anything useful. You need to have some sense of where to look.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one more.
Yeah, hi. Sorry, I'm over to, this side. I'm sort of hiding in the dark. I just wanted a question for the guys supporting the argument. Where do you draw the line between just Google it and maybe 20 years ago, just look it up in a textbook? Where's the difference, and is it purely the fact that one's been published and one's been placed in the public domain?
So no, that's a great point, and actually a lot of the work on showing why you can't Google it also actually shows that a lot of print reference sources have the same problem. So one of the papers I like most about this is by a man called George Miller, who wrote an article back in the 80s about why using dictionaries and thesauruses to learn new words was not effective. Because he said that you give students a dictionary, they know how to use the dictionary, you give them a sentence like, Mrs. Morrow stirred the soup, you give them a dictionary and say, just look it up, look up a word to replace that with, and they come back, they were given Mrs. Morrow stirred the soup, they write, Mrs. Morrow stimulated the soup. Okay? So you're absolutely right, it isn't just online resources I'm talking about here. The same arguments could apply to a lot of offline resources. The issue is around, can you just look it up? Is it okay to be able to put everything out there and just think, if I know how to use a dictionary or thesaurus, that's fine? And what all the research shows is whether that resource is on or offline, it's not fine. What we need are better designed learning environments, and that's where I think absolutely both in print and online, we can design things that do work. But the thing that's going to make them work is a recognition that they are not there to replace memory, they are there to support and enhance it. So absolutely agree with you about the issue with print textbooks.
You've got to wrap up. We have time for just one more burning question. Oh, perfect. Yeah, thank you.
Let's hear what he said.
So, I am the youngest person here, so I don't know half of this stuff. Okay, I'm directing this to anyone, just answer my question. So, it was a while ago, my sister had to make something for her school. I told my mom in the car, hey mom, don't go on the internet, just blow up a balloon and paint it. She's making some garden insect, I don't know. Anyways, so my mom just went and Googled it. I'm sorry, you spoke very well for the debate, but I'm directing it at them. Sorry. But she was just Googling that, how do you make a ladybug? You should be creative. I think it's making people waste. And I don't think stupid is a word, actually. So, I'm just asking.
So what is your question?
Yeah. Is Google making people stupider by not being creative and thinking and brainstorming maybe new, different ideas?
Thank you. And that sounds like one for our opponents.
That was great. I think the point is, it's not just Google. It's referencing anything. You should stop looking stuff up, okay? No more dictionaries, no more nothing. Don't look anything up anywhere, because that act of referencing is going to erode your mind, right? That's the problem. Is Google taking away from our creativity? I don't think so, because Google fosters creativity. Google sparks imagination. Google opens up the world for so many things that you can get access to. How many times have you went on Google and had the experience of looking for something and finding something else that was even cooler? Has that ever happened to anybody? Yeah. Okay, so that's what Google gets you. And you don't get that from a book, right? That's a very hard experience to get from a book. But Google does that. Now, you can say it draws you in and bad things happen, but I think really, really good things happen because of that. So great question.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, well, let's have a round of applause for our inputs. Each team now has just 3 minutes maximum to sum up. And I'd like to start with Daisy's team.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, to sum up in this debate, actually to begin with, I'd like to focus on the points where I think there has been agreement, because I think there has been a great deal of agreement. I think that, first of all, we agree on both sides that Google, education technology, the internet in general, are fantastic learning resources. They hold enormous promise. They're incredibly valuable. We would also agree, and I think just to make this clear, we on the proposition do not want to shut down the internet. We are not about censorship. We are about open access, and we would agree completely with what the opposition said about the value of open access to knowledge, to information. We totally agree with that as well. We also agree with the opposition about what are the aims in the end of education, what are the things we want to achieve. We agree with them. I think Koen said, it's 4 C's, I'm going to forget a C, but creativity, collaboration, critical thinking, I know there was another C, but problem solving I think was mentioned. Andrew was mentioning synthesizing and integrating information. We agree with all that too. For us, that is the aim of education. I think Andrew said an interesting thing where he said, we want the emphasis to be on synthesizing and integrating, not on recall. Funny enough, we agree with that too. That should be the aim. The aim should be that when you are doing any complex problem in life, you're not worrying about the recall because it's so well stored away in long-term memory that you can free up that so well stored away in long-term memory that you can free up that space in working memory to do all the things Andrew and Koen are talking about. So I think the real disagreement here is not on aims, it is on methods. It is on how do we get to be the synthesizer and the integrator? How do we get to be the problem solver and the collaborator? And where we disagree is on that. And we disagree with this idea that open discovery learning on Google, as Koen was saying, where the teacher just steps back and lets the kids explore. We disagree about that. We think that is not an effective method of learning. We think that just turning kids over into Google and looking for stuff, that's not going to work. That is essentially pure discovery learning. And we know, as Sam said, as he built up, we have oceans of evidence to show that that kind of pure discovery learning is misleading, it creates misconceptions, and at its very worst, it creates very dangerous falsehoods. And we know that to be true, as Sam was saying, from all those meta-analyses on the power of direct instruction when compared to discovery learning. So I think the real disagreement here is not about the aims of education. The real disagreement is about the methods. And what we've heard over here is that this unstructured, unguided approach where you just look stuff up on Google is a problem. And I think we would agree, as I say, that when you get to the end point of education, you don't want to have to worry about recall. We agree with that. And we think the way you get there is by getting that stuff locked down in the earlier bit of education. And I think Andrew mounted a very good defense of Google, but think about fluency. Think about, can you be stopping all the time? Andrew told you about, that feeling you have when you look something up on Google and you find something more interesting. What about that feeling you have when you spend some time on Google and you click on a lot of tabs and you found some cool things, and how much do you remember the next day? How much of it is there? Do we really want a doctor in the middle of surgery to stop and go, hang on a minute, I just need to Google that? If you're driving a car in icy conditions, do you really want to have to think, I'll just Google what you do when you hit a skid? Do you want to be Googling those kinds of things? We need these facts in long-term memory. And I would ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what's happening, I think, with a lot of people who are adults who can use Google effectively is you're forgetting all that stuff you've got in long-term memory. You're forgetting how powerful it is, so just think about that. And I would say, just to sum up, that the most powerful and effective methods of educational technology, which I love and spend a lot of time with, they are being compromised by the idea that we can just Google it. So I think if you're in favour of education technology and all the power it can achieve, we need to move away from this idea that you can just Google it. Attention, we need to remember. We need to remember that if you're just Googling it, you're not going to have those facts in long-term memory. You won't be able to use them for all those powerful aims. Thank you.
Thank you. Andrew.
Betsy's awesome. But the debate is not about educational methodology. It's about whether Google makes you stupid. Stupid. The thing about the doctor, that's a classic. I've used that when I've been on the other side of the debate. But it's wrong. The body of medical knowledge doubles every 7 years, and it's going faster and faster and faster. And you know what residents do now? They run around looking stuff up because you cannot hold all that information in memory. You don't want the guy going, I think it was this. You want him knowing. So I don't want to waste the next 2.5 minutes talking about that. I want to give you a little more data. how the web affects memory. Psychology professor Daniel Wagner from a little school called Harvard in 2011 did a study called Google Effects on Memory, Cognitive Consequences of Having Information at Our Fingertips. Good news for you guys, shows that people have access to search engines. They remember fewer facts, less information, because they rely on search as a readily available shortcut. Aha! However, Wagner concedes that questions remain about whether dependence on computers will actually affect memory negatively. He says nobody knows what the effects of these tools are going to be on logical thinking in the future, and he believes that the situation overall is beneficial, as Daisy mentioned about technology being neutral, likening dependence on search to dependence on the use of calculators in the classroom. Initially, math students were banned from using the calculator, he points out, but now it's gotten to the point where most of the time they're being tested on their ability to use the calculator and to do wonderful things with those tools in hand. What is the most complex thing in the universe known out there? Anyone? It's the human mind, right? The human brain is the most complex structure out there. It's the most adaptable, versatile system ever created. And to think that our minds are somehow diminished by a tool that surfaces and links foundational elements about our world is simply wrong. In fact, I humbly put forward that that's dangerous thinking. It implies that somehow we're frail, we're inexperienced, we're going to surrender our will to learn to a search engine. And that goes against the whole core purpose of our DNA, to survive and to thrive. If anything, we know that using this powerful tool can take us to the next level of our ability to understand the world around us and improve the human condition. And I'll leave you with a story. I travel constantly, as many of you do, and 2 years ago I got a chance to go to Rwanda to look at technology and how it can improve their lives. Rwanda is a country that's hell-bent on radically improving the lives for their 11.7 million citizens. The leadership of Rwanda believes that education is the core of this transformation and are investing with their hearts, their feet, and their very scarce resources to do that. I visited 19 schools, and I went to one remote school in a village called Reru. I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And it looked like they just got running water at this school. But they also had high-speed internet and made in Rwanda laptops. And in that school, I witnessed students in the most remote classroom that I've ever been to connecting to the internet, using Google to search, explore their vast world. And for the first time in so many generations, these Rwandan children had access to information under the guidance of their teachers to travel past their poverty, beyond the difficult history, and step into the future. So I don't know how anyone can argue anywhere that Google is making these children less smart. And if the ability to reach beyond your own experience to access thoughts that you've never had before and connect knowledge from the vastly different contexts is a sign of stupidity, then count me in. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of you. Colleagues, you've heard both sides of the argument, and it's now time to vote again. So if you take your gadgets, you'll remember that A is to support the motion that looking things up on Google is making us stupider. Or as I should say, I can just Google it is making us stupider. Pressing the B button is that you're against the motion, and C is undecided. So you now have 10 seconds to vote. Well, we've got a reduction in the Bs, so 4 wins because they've gone up. So this was good argumentation. Well done, everyone. And I think a particular congratulations to everybody, because it shows how serious we were taking it, that chaos didn't break out when the lights went off. So well done. A big hand to everyone.